I'm going to stand today. If Christ is risen, I can stand. Well, I promised you, didn't I? I promised you a detective story this morning. You know I like a good detective story. I like a courtroom scene. Picture the moment. Little dust fluttering down. Quiet. Peace. And then the judge comes in, doesn't he? And everybody stands. You get that shuffle as everybody stands. Well, it's nothing to do with that today. We're going to do a different type of story today. We're going to have a coroner's court today. Coroner's court. Okay. Do you know there are things that that I have seen, that I've been able to stand and witness, and it has brought me out in goosebumps, you know. I am, as many of you will be, who are about my age, Beatles fans. Joanne and I last year, we went to both of the houses of Paul McCartney and John Lennon, and to be in those places and look at the things they were looking at. Look, you've got to be a bit of a music fanatic and a bit of a Beatles fanatic to appreciate it. But to be in those places and see the things that they saw on a daily basis, touch the things that were there on a daily basis, and know the narrative of, if you've read enough about people like that, to know that these things were important and they're talked about, and then you get to see them with your own eyes, you get to witness them. And you in Cosley, guys, you've got your own rock star just down the road in Gough Road. You really have. Kelly Growcut. There's a blue plaque on his house down in Gough Road. How many of you knew that? Thank you, Leanne. It's my daughter at the back there, of course it is. Kelly Growcut. Kelly Growcut was a real hero of mine and a Cosley lad, and there is the blue plaque on his house just down the road. And I have stood outside his house and I've looked at the things that he would have looked at every single occasion that he came out the front door. I mean, those houses have been there a long time. What's across the road has been there a long time. The same things. There's something fascinating for me. If you go and visit HMS Victory and you walk around that ship and you still hear it creaking, there is something evocative of what took place there. And you get to see it and you get to witness it, and it sort of really makes my skin come out in goosebumps, you know. These things that I get to witness and see. I never saw the empty tomb. I never got there. With my own eyes, I never saw the empty tomb. Did you? You're older than me if you did. The reality is none of us have seen it. We can't put ourselves there and look at the empty tomb with the stone rolled away, where we are literally visualizing with our own eyes what has taken place. So it's very different to going to a Beatles house. It's very different to standing on the decks of HMS Victory. What do we have? We have testimony. We have the words of people. We have gospel accounts that we believe are historical narrative. We have so much to go on. But you see, a good courtroom, whether it is a criminal court or a coroner's court, depends absolutely on evidence. No evidence, no verdict. Or you could have a verdict that is a no verdict. But you want to prove something, you have to have evidence. If you haven't got the evidence, you will not prove it. And I've stood in enough courts on the right side of the dock to know that that's the case. And sometimes people have walked because the evidence was insufficient. So today we're going to embrace a little coroner's court scene. And we're going to listen to what happens in those occasions. So we all like a good detective story, don't we? You're all detectives today, okay? You're all on my side, all right? You're not the enemy. You're all on my side. You're the detective. You're the proof makers. You're the evidence gatherers. But as a county coroner might do, I am not here, because I'm going to play his part, I'm not here to prosecute or defend. I am just to weigh up the facts of the evidence before my closing conclusions. Is that okay? So I want you to imagine a Sunday morning crime scene. And we're going to read all about that now in John 20. John chapter 20. It's at this point I get to hear lots of pages turning, a rustle in the room, and you're all convincing yourself you've got tablets. And I know you're only texting somebody else. Now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came early to the tomb while it was still dark. And she saw the stone already taken away from the tomb. So she ran and came to Simon Peter and to the other disciple who Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken away the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." So Peter and the other disciple went forth, and they were going to the tomb. The two were running together, and the other disciple ran ahead faster than Peter and came to the tomb first. And stooping and looking in, he saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. And so Simon Peter also came following him and entered the tomb. And he saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the face cloth which had been on his head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. So the other disciple who had come first to the tomb also then entered, and he saw and believed. For as yet they did not understand the scripture that he must rise again from the dead. So the disciples went away again to their own homes. But Mary was standing outside the tomb weeping. And so as she wept, she stooped and looked into the tomb. And she saw two angels in white, sitting, one at the head and one at the feet, where the body of Jesus had been lying. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "Because they have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there. She did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Who are you seeking?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Stop clinging to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father, but go to my brethren and say to them, I ascend to my Father and your Father, and my God and your God." Mary Magdalene came announcing to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and that he had said these things to her. So when it was evening on that day, the first day of the week, and when the doors were shut where the disciples were for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood in their midst and said to them, "Peace be with you." And when he had said this, he showed them both his hands and his side. The disciples then rejoiced when they saw the Lord. So Jesus said to them again, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I also send you." And when he had said this, he breathed on them and said to them, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive the sins of any, their sins have been forgiven them. If you retain the sins of any, they have been retained." But Thomas, one of the 12, called Didymus, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples were saying to him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see his hands, the imprint of the nails, and put my finger into the place of the nails, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." And after 8 days, his disciples were again inside, and Thomas with them. Jesus came, the doors having been shut, and stood in their midst and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Reach here with your finger and see my hands, and reach here with your hand and put it into my side, and do not be unbelieving, but believing." And Thomas answered and said to him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who did not see me and yet believed." Therefore many other signs Jesus also performed in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book. But these have been written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name. May God bless that word to us this morning. So picture the crime scene, the Sunday morning crime scene then. An empty tomb, devoid of its body, and a recently deceased man of 34 years of age. In the grave there remained only the wrappings and the face cloth of the body. The huge stone which stood in the entrance was rolled away, and the guards outside a blubbering wreck, unable to account for what had happened. This story is about a man who was tortured, who was murdered, and then went missing from his grave. So let's first look at the circumstances of the crime then. A young known troublemaker, Jesus of Nazareth, aged 34 years, was arrested by the authorities after going about causing trouble, attacking the moneylenders in the temple and making allegedly false claims about being a king and being the Son of God. It is suggested that he had fooled some into following him and following his lies, but he wasn't fooling the authorities. We know that he was given every opportunity to account for his actions and to retract his statements, but it was recorded by the scribe to the Roman governor, Pilate, this: he did not answer with regard to even a single charge, so the governor was quite amazed. That's what this disciple called Matthew said. He did not answer with regard to even a single charge, so the governor was quite amazed. He should have spoken up for himself. Perhaps it wouldn't have happened. But because he provided no defense, then he must have been guilty and was handed over to be brutally flogged and tortured till he was nearly dead, and then crucified by being nailed to a wooden cross. This decision is defended by the Roman government, who said that the prosecution was in no way influenced by a large, rampant, violent crowd of maniacs, those who were likely to riot in the event of a not guilty verdict. No. The man Jesus then, in full view of everyone, was nailed to the cross and raised up between two other criminals. It is of note that the daylight was very bad and the hour of the day was very confusing for some. It's also worth mentioning that coincidentally, while the execution was taking place, there was something of a disturbance at Herod's temple where the curtain that separates the Holy of Holies became torn. We don't have any more information on that yet. He obviously, though, wasn't dying quick enough, though, as he appeared to be having a conversation with one of the criminals on his right. And also shouting something at an unknown recipient. And so, after allowing a little more time for the crowd to mock him, just so they might vent their frustrations, you understand, he was speared in the heart by one of the Roman soldiers. There did seem to be some support for the man, as there were a few individuals, simple folk in the main, who appeared to be very upset by proceedings. Once the man was confirmed as dead, he was handed over to two men of the Sanhedrin, named Joseph of Arimathea and another man called Nicodemus, who promised the authorities he would be properly buried and further crowd trouble would be avoided. The two men wrapped the body tightly in grave clothes and with traditional spices and placed him in an unused tomb. Apparently this was donated by one of the men. And it was very close to the execution site. The tomb entrance was closed shut with a heavy stone, which took several men to move into place. Just to be on the safe side, though, the Roman governor instructed that guards be placed at the entrance. He wanted no more trouble from these Jewish thugs. All the evidence suggests that everything was in place. There was adequate security around a man who was, after all, dead and buried. Now let's talk about the discovery of the crime. While it was still early morning, during the hours of darkness, the tomb was approached by some women who knew the deceased, and they had intended delivering more perfumes and spices, apparently. When they arrived, the stone in the entrance had been moved away. And they said they did not see the guards, though we will hear later that the guards were found trembling and incoherent, so had probably undergone some unnoticed thing after failing to challenge the women. The women said that one of them, Mary Magdalene, had briefly gone inside, and it sounded like she was speaking with somebody inside the tomb. However, I must say that no one was later to be found, either leaving the tomb or seen inside the tomb by anybody else. She then, along with others, apparently fled and shaken, but empty-handed. The rest of the evidence rests on two men who said they had been found by the women as they themselves approached the tomb and told of the discovery. The men, Johanan and Cephas, John and Peter, local fishermen, had found the tomb as described, John having arrived in the entrance first. and Peter arriving and actually going into the crime scene before John. The rest we know. No body, no grave clothing left behind where the body should have been. A possibility of someone else at the scene inside, though never physically seen walking away. The large stone had been moved, though the Roman authorities insist their guard's version of not knowing what happened to them or to the scene. The most strange sequence of events got even stranger when Mary Magdalene insists that not only did two men inside the tomb who glowed white tell her Jesus was not dead, but that she later saw and confirmed that this Jesus of Nazareth was in fact alive. I would suggest this woman just might have a disturbed mind. This then is the possible version of events. Firstly, Jesus was not really dead. That could be one of the things we consider. But firstly, he would have been the first person to survive crucifixion. And we know he was certainly confirmed as dead, as this was recorded as fact. You know, the Romans were very good at identifying a dead person because they killed many people and checked. If he was not dead, then surely he would have called out to be rescued from his tomb. So perhaps Jesus was not really dead, but those things seem to doubt that. Secondly, he might have been physically removed by someone from the tomb. But the guards would have seen. If the followers of Jesus removed him, then he would not, as a dead person, be worth the impending prosecution and suffering. And if his enemies had stolen him, they would have produced the body to refute claims that he was actually alive. Thirdly, another possibility that he was dead and now he's alive. This actually is the only scenario that fits the evidence. He was not in the tomb, though we know that he was dead and buried. There are witnesses who have nothing to gain but persecution, who say their evidence is true, and they have seen him both dead and now alive. That he is who he says he is, and that he overcame the power of death and the grave. I put it to you, members of today's jury, that the truth is that there is in fact no crime scene. Only a scene of life and not a scene of death. This man Jesus is risen from the dead and is alive today. He has overcome death that we might also overcome death. See, people like to bring about this idea. That's the end of the courtroom scene, by the way. They like to bring about this idea that there is no proof for either the crucifixion or the resurrection. If you've looked at the latest podcast, Saab and I are discussing just for a few minutes some of the possibilities and some of the probabilities and some of the evidence for both the crucifixion and for the resurrection. If Christ did not rise, then you and I are wasting our time here today. We're just having a happy gathering that has nothing to do with new life, with eternity, and with a God that cares. That's what it would be. Without the resurrection, then there is no faith. You see, the idea of the crucifixion, and this is one of the things that Saab and I talked about, the idea of the crucifixion where Jesus, the man, died on the cross. And by the way, I talked about on Friday, didn't I, about his deity, the fact that he was no less God. He was still fully God, he was fully man. It's called the hypostatic union, that Christ was both of these things, fully man, fully God. But this idea that he died on the cross, that's fairly easy to accept, because the Romans were good at killing people. And when they nailed them to a cross, or when they hung them on a cross, they died. Always, they died. And it is such a slow, tortuous... See, what the Romans were good at was killing people slowly. And doing it in a very exhibitionist way. So the reason Jesus was crucified in the way that he was is so that people could see it. They didn't have a private execution. They didn't take him out behind a building somewhere and chuck spears at him. No. They put him up on a cross between two criminals, as though three, that they would all die this awful and slow, tragic and tumultuous death. The reason that people accept the crucifixion is because it ends in death. It's not a problem. We talked about two guys, Tacitus and Josephus. Both of those recorded not only that Jesus of Nazareth lived, but also that he died on a cross, and that this whole Christianity thing began in a very small way, but began to flourish. It's not hard for readers of history to believe that he died, because he did. He died. What's much harder is that he came back to life. Now, the thing that's always occurred to me is the reason that people don't like that bit is because that bit is about their sin. That bit is about the challenge of you see, if Jesus came back to life, then their sin is a problem. And most people driving past, walking past, enjoying their eggs today and their family lunch today and doing all that stuff, which is nice. Happy Easter, that's nice. Without the resurrection of Christ, not only would there be no point to any of that, there would be no point to life. Because we are simply born then to die. Our miserable lives start at one end as a newborn. And as soon as we're born, we're on our way to the end of things. It's all one direction. And then we expire. These rubbish bodies give out, and all of a sudden we know then that we are at the end of life. Well, if we do not believe that there is anything else after that, then let's use a worldly term. Good luck to you. Because that's all you're going to get. Look, that's it. But you're still going to die. The difference is, because of what Jesus did, that he was resurrected on this day that we celebrate today, we can all point at that and say, but there can be new life. If that is true and all the evidence, watch the podcast, all the evidence says it's true, then we can all point at that and say, that is new life. There is life after death. But that is only if we follow he who rised first. If we don't, then not only is death still a thing, eternal death is a thing. Weeping and gnashing of teeth. That's how it's described, the other place. With weeping and gnashing of teeth. Two types of people there. There are the weepers. There are those who are still mourning the fact that their sin was so attractive, that lifestyle was so attractive to them, that they ended up there. And they are weeping because they cannot do anything about it now. And I think it was Jonathan Edwards that said they would not even be able to produce enough tears to formulate a drink. And the heat and the fire would continue to consume them for all eternity. Nice place. The other place is about life. And it's about new life. But there is a cost. For you to be able to pursue that new life, Jesus gave everything. Everything. He gave it. And yet still, miserable worms will say, it's not enough. Well, if eternity isn't long enough for you, I hope you have a good holiday this year and make the best of it, because it might be your last. The reality is this. This is our future. It is death or it is life. That's it. There's no halfway house. There's no party in hell. There is nothing about that. The reality is very simple. You will either end up, if you do not pursue Christ, you will end up as a weeper or as a gnasher. A weeper, where your tears will not be enough to make you drink, or a gnash. What are the gnashers? They are the gnashers. Oh God, how did you do this to me? You bad God. You unfair God. They're the gnashers. And you'll be one or the other of those. Or if you pursue Christ, you will know the joy now of knowing him. You will have the eternal joy of knowing him. And you will be with him in paradise. That's what he said to the thief on the cross. See, the thief on the cross, I've mentioned this before, he didn't do a course. He didn't go through a process of justification. None of this was explained to him. This is what justification is. This is what sanctification is. This is what this is. This is what that is. This is how you get to heaven. No, Jesus just said to him, today you will be with me in paradise. Jesus has either said that to you already or he hasn't. Revelation 21 verse 4 says this, that he, that is Jesus, will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning or crying nor pain, for the former things have passed away. See, that minute that we close our eyes for the last time is the glorious beginning of something else. It is the glorious beginning of life as you were meant to have it. This is all a sham. This is a sham. This is a world that is fallen, lost, broken. If you don't think that now in the current state of affairs, looking around the world, I mean, I can whinge. Let me tell you, I can whinge like a good un. And all I seem to do at the moment is either open the newspaper or look at my phone and whinge. Because the place is such a horrible, ugly, painful place. That is not like heaven. There will be no more tears, only joy if you pursue Christ. So sometimes we have lots of questions and sometimes not a lot of answers. Yet there is one answer I do have for you, and this is truth, that Jesus Christ is alive. He is alive. Not half dead, he is alive, fully alive. It can be easy to believe who Jesus is, for some only if they could put their finger in his wound. People are still looking for those wounds. People are looking for that final little jigsaw piece to stick their finger in. Do you know that? What a waste of time that is. Because if you die with your finger in the air, you ain't going to find it. We weren't there at the resurrection. I began by saying these historical places that I've been, that I've seen, and it's made goosebumps on my skin because of these amazing things that I am seeing and knowing that they are true. But there are many, 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 many things that I have never seen, but I know they are true. See, we can come up with lots and lots of excuses for not believing the resurrection, but believe it, we must. An interesting quote from a guy called Charles Colson. He was the former counsel of President Nixon. Again, if you're my age, you remember who President Nixon was. And again, this Charles Colson was a convicted conspirator in the Watergate scandal. The Watergate scandal was on President Richard Nixon's watch. And basically, he sent a team of agents, if you like, into an office building where he might gather information on his competitor coming up to the next election. This Charles Colson wrote this about that time. He said there were only 8 or 10 of us in the inner circle around the president who really knew what was going on. All we had to do was stonewall for a couple of months and the Watergate scandal would be over. In other words, keep your mouth shut. Keep yourself to yourself. In a couple of months, it'll all blow over. It'll all be done. He said we had all the power and the prestige of the presidency at our fingertips. And if the truth broke, there would be embarrassment and perhaps a prison sentence. There was no grave danger. Our lives were not threatened, but we couldn't hold the conspiracy together for more than 3 weeks. We couldn't contain the lie. Once prosecution was possible, the natural instincts of self-preservation were so overwhelming that one by one the conspirators caved in and all stood in line at the prosecutor's office to escape jail. Colson concludes this: I know that the disciples of Jesus could not perpetuate a lie like the resurrection. Why? Because it was not just their reputations that were at stake. Their lives were in danger. They had no clout. They had nothing to gain by the lie, and yet every one of them stood fast in the conviction that Jesus was alive. Take it from one who saw firsthand how vulnerable a cover-up is. Nothing less than a witness as awesome as the resurrected Christ could have caused those men to maintain their dying whispers that Jesus is alive and he is Lord. Each apostle, except for John, die a martyr's death. You can't hold a secret like that. No, not in the pain. There would be somebody going, actually, just to save my skin, it's not, it's not true. It was never true. We made it up. That doesn't happen. So ask yourself this, church. Would you die for a lie? When it comes to believing in the resurrection of Jesus, we cannot simply seek knowledge. We must seek this thing called faith. Faith is what we need. It's not always about the evidence. Many of us have pragmatic minds. We have ways that we go to evidential things and we see things in a very practical and pragmatic way. But you need faith. If you want the eyes to see the open tomb, you have to ask God for faith. You see, that is the DVD you did. That's the high-res DVD that you get to watch. It's called faith. And all of a sudden you can see that empty tomb. You can see that stone rolled away. You can hear that dust falling. You just know in that faith that this is true, and it'll put goosebumps on your skin. You see, it must be our hearts that are drawn into a relationship with Christ. It's not going to happen with our heads. Because we are all rational people. And sometimes we have to move out of the rationale into this thing called faith. And only God can give you that faith. If you haven't got that faith, you do not have the eyes to see. I'm sorry. So the first thing we ask God for is faith to see. Paul said this to the church in Rome: if you believe in your heart and confess with your lips that God raised Jesus from the dead, then you will be saved. See, where our believing comes from, it comes from the heart. By the way, if you were all hoping for 12:30 today, remember I said it's an extended morning. But we're only here till 3. All right. That's the good news. Do you see where our believing comes from? It comes from the heart. It doesn't come from the head. This is why nobody can describe what the soul of man is. People say, well, there's no such thing as the soul. And then you ask the question, well, where does your emotion come from then? Is it from your brain? Because I think your brain, and all the neurosurgeons testify that all your brain does is act on your emotional state. So where do your emotions come from? The heart is the source. It doesn't just give life. It is the receiver of life. When God enters your heart, that is where the faith comes from. You will never read enough books or hear enough preachers like me to believe. I cannot assist you in that. Your heart. That is where your belief comes from, your heart. Now, some of you will remain till the day you die hard-hearted. You will not believe. You will die a mortal death. And you will be transcended to a most awful place you can possibly imagine. And it's preachers like me and people in pulpits today that hopefully have the defibrillator to wake you up, to get your heart started again. God said he'd give you a heart of flesh, not stone. But some of you are just sinking. Your hearts of stone are just dragging you down. Ezekiel, an Old Testament prophet, said this: I will give you a new heart. These are the words of God through his prophet. I will give you a new heart, and I will put a new spirit in you, and I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit in you. So God doesn't just give us this vehicle of faith. He puts himself in us. And then he continues to see the reflection of himself in us. He sees the righteousness in us, that is his Son. He sees the work in us and the service in us, that is his Spirit. And he sees the life in us, that is him. I love what we're told in Luke chapter 24, verses 10 and 11. This is what the word says. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the others with them who told this, that is the account of the empty tomb, to the apostles. But they did not believe the women because their words seemed like them nonsense. They lived with Jesus for 3 years, nearly all of them. Some of them were related to him, so they'd known him his whole natural life, and they still didn't believe. They were there when the miracles happened. You see, people say, show me the signs and wonders then. If you show me the signs and wonders, these people with their fingers waiting for the wound, you know. Show us the signs and wonders and I'll believe. Jesus said, blessed are those who have not seen me and believe. I want to be blessed. You're blessed. If you know him, you are blessed. They'd seen him, walked with him, ate with him, laughed with him, joked with him, suffered with him, slept alongside him, watched his ministry, saw the signs, seen the wonders, seen the miracles. They've done all this for at minimum 3 years. And they still don't believe. Still wagging a finger. Wait till I can put the finger in the wound, said Thomas. Jesus said to Thomas, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who believe in me that have not seen me. See, there are many things that happen when we believe in Jesus, but I want to end this by highlighting 2 specifics. When we can see with our hearts, open the eyes of my heart, Lord. We sing these things, don't we? But these things are true. Open the eyes of my heart, that my heart can see the empty tomb. The stone that is rolled away. The absence now of the guards, who've probably running for the hills. The grave clothes. The dust and the still air that is just settling in there. If you can see that with the eyes of your heart, then you have come to realize that the bonds of death are broken. If you know Jesus today, truly know him. I mean truly know him. Not know of him. Truly know him intimately. If you know him, then the bonds of death over you have been broken. And it is new life that you have now to look forward to. Isn't that a happy Easter message? That if God gives us the faith to believe, we simply believe and trust. He convicts us of this ugliness of sin in our life, and he says, get rid of that. That's what it's going to cost you. That's your cost. It's nowhere near what it cost me. But all it's going to cost you is get rid of that bit called self. Get rid of that. You will be happier. You will be more joyful. You will find joy in the pain. You will find joy in the suffering. You will find joy in all of the things that the world will tell you you cannot. And you will find joy in not having what the world has. The world has a very short end. See, in Corinthians chapter 15, verses 54 and 55, Paul wrote this: "For our perishable earthly bodies must be transformed into heavenly bodies that will never die." Today, folks, hopefully you've heard enough that those of you who know Jesus, you know you will never die. That is the evidence. That is the promise of the glorious resurrection. And my prayer today, as you all go from here, is that if you don't know him, you come to know him. Time is running out. I promise you, time is running out. And if you don't know him, you are lost and will remain lost. And my prayer is that you don't remain lost. It's that you come into that family, that you come into a family that can be joyful in the pain and the suffering, that you come into a family that can look at the world and know this is just a pit stop. You're just getting your wheels changed. That's all it is. The reality is there is a checkered flag, and that checkered flag is paradise. I pray that you all reach it.